ladies and gentlemen, this is Haywood Barber, the Haywood Barber Show, also known as the Harlem Heretic, because I march to my own beat, I do my own thing, I feel like I am a complete independent, and yes indeed, ladies rock, girls rock, our daughters rock, my daughter rocks, and I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the ladies in America, the sisters in particular, and just give a tribute to the fact of the sisters and what they do. And when I say that, I mean I don't want to take anything away from all the sisters of America, but yes, I'm talking specifically to my sisters, to the sisters that I grew up with in my neighborhood. I talk often about Wagner Projects, and I talk about Holy Rosary, and I talk about my base, my foundation, and where I come from. And you guys rock. I mean, I was fortunate enough to grow up, and I talk about this on Facebook. I used to talk about it a lot on Facebook, where I grew up in a building that was 16 stories high, with 8 apartments on each floor except for the first floor, which had one big apartment. And most Americans would classify this as the projects. I call it, my reference to it is the projects. And that's where I grew up. And I learned a lot. And tonight, I have to say that I learned a lot from my older sisters, my younger sisters, and my equals, and then when I say equals, I mean my age range, because I mean everything, there's sometimes when I go home and I go back to the projects that I grew up in. I grew up in one of the biggest projects in Manhattan. Right in my projects was right before you went into the Bronx, and quite frankly, the Bronx and my projects and my area, which was called Spanish Harlem, that was comprised of Italians, Irish, blacks, and Puerto Ricans, even other Latinos, but primarily those 4 groups. And I learned a lot. And when I grew up, gangs was quite prolific. They were everywhere, gangs, and I grew up with safe passage because of my god brother. And quite frankly, I think about my god sister, Karen, quite often, because she was an instrumental part of me becoming the gentleman that I have become. And look, I gotta be honest. I mean, I have done things that I'm not proud of, that I have hid from her. She doesn't know, and when I see her, she has complete reverence. And she is still a yes ma'am and a no ma'am when I talk with her. And look, yeah, because I know that from time to time the right wing, and I used to be somewhat a part of the right wing. I was a registered Republican for a long time, and probably the reason why I moved away from them to be an instrumental part of that body, because they gave the projects, and at the time, and I think that we all have moved up the ranks. We've become somewhat of the middle class and the middle base, but they really did pounce on, after the Reagan era, they pounced on the lower middle class, or the upper poor class. I don't even know how to I mean, it just doesn't even make any sense, the way they were segmenting and striping. And the funniest thing is, they try to, when I think about Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh and Mr. Savage, and I don't know if I should even be going that far, and how they try to characterize us and those people that I was a part of. And for a long time, I actually, pushed myself away, because I was trying to be a part of, I don't know if I was trying to be a part of the elite, but I was being a part of, growing out of where I was coming from. And I have to say that I'm somewhat embarrassed because I moved myself so far away, even though, and it did me some good, pulling myself up from the bootstraps and all that kind of stuff. But lo and behold, everybody that came from my circle did. And my sister, and, she and I, we grew up on the same floor, but she was so instrumental in rearing a good foundation. Now, look, I'm not taking away from my mother and my father. They gave me a good, solid foundation. They're currently still together. And I'm sure they'll be together until their dying day. And my mother just informed me that they've been together or been married for 54 years and have been together since 1954. So that's 59 years. That'll be 60 years in a year. She didn't tell me exactly the month, but it turns out that my grandmother left to go to New York, left her and her older sister and her brother, a little bit older than her still, in North Carolina. And that's when my father swooped in, and he doesn't like that term when I said it tonight. But they gave me a strong foundation. But I have to give tribute to the ladies, and at the time they were girls. When I think about my sister, Karen, she was only maybe 4 years older than me, maybe not even that much older than me. And she was such an instrumental part. And there are other ladies as well, Rosalie, and she's, I believe, older than even Karen. There was such an instrumental part, maybe not, but an instrumental part in my foundation. And I like to talk about my foundation because my foundation gave me the added strength to be, not to be caught in a quagmire, if you will. So I take my hat off to the Karens and Rosalies and Sands and Sands. I can say that again twice. And the Sheilas and even the Moniques and all those from different neighborhoods around the city of New York City and the country, for that matter, and different counties and cities and things like that around the country that put gusto in men without it being a sexual manifesto, if you will, or a sexual connotation in terms of it could be twisted. Because these ladies were in my life and they gave me an understanding and a reverence that I would respect. And now look, some of the ladies my age and maybe younger, some of them called me different names and, player and all this other kind of stuff, and it was true, but I tried to always be real respectful and lady, and I did, like, as I said, some of the craziest nonsense that you could ever think of. But this song that I just played, Aretha Franklin's Respect, is what I have to say came from my sister Karen, Rosalie, the other ladies I just mentioned, as a strong foundation of how to be the best that I can be. And then I have to put the twist on it to a certain degree, because they made me give them respect, which was ultimately due, and now I realize that it was excellent in overall behavior. So here I say all of that to say single fathers, single mothers, conjoining families and stepfathers and stepmothers, as you come into relationships with boys, it's okay to have a strong influence. Because my sister Karen, even today, if I see her now, it does not move beyond the margins of, yes, I love you, I care for you, but make sure you maintain your level. She's always asking me, how are you being? How are you doing? And when that how are you doing goes right into how are you being, and are you still being a gentleman? I see you look good, you dress well, and all that kind of stuff. And I did, even as an early teenager. I dressed well. My dad, because my dad was one of those guys that dressed real good. But I had a standard to keep up to. So even though when I left the house with the base that my mother and father gave me, I had a base to live up to among the ladies in the building that I grew up with. And of course, I one day I will give a tribute to the older ladies, but today I am compelled to give a tribute to the young ladies that were just a little bit older than me, and some of them were 8 years. I think Rosalie might be 6 or 7 years older than me, and I mean, I can't wait to tell the stories about. Yeah, Rosalie was an older sister to me, and how she had one of the first older sisters that I had that had her own place, and opened her whole. Gosh, I mean, when I think about it, she opened her whole world up to me. Her brother, one of her younger brothers, not the youngest brother, was my best friend, is my best friend. He and I have known each other, and we've been close. I'm gonna be 50, so that means we met each other when I was 2. He says 3, so and we've been together 47 or 48 years as best friends. Back in nursery, pre-K, and when he and I became teenagers, I mean teenagers in the 16, 17-year-old range. She opened up her whole existence to him, and that led to opening that whole existence up to me. So my first piece of freedom, if you will, was being able to hang out in her house in the Upper Bronx, right before Westchester, in a place called Parkchester. A little water, and gave me the ability to be able to stay at her house 4, 5, 6 days in a row, which almost missed her, when I think about it, and now that I know, almost missed her opportunity of her love of her life. Not to really get into her whole situation, because this is all about me, and then explaining from me my foundation for how ladies and single fathers, because I know there's so many single fathers out there nowadays, to make sure that you put such a strong foundation and let the neighborhood, and I know that there's so much to be said today about neighborhoods. They're not like they used to be, but I think if we keep ourselves open, that the neighborhood can still give strong foundation. And I'm not sure what year, what generation things turned around where we don't want anybody in our business. See, because when I grew up, and I know God knows, I know, and there's probably no 30-somethings on my call or on my radio show. But when when I was growing up, and when I was a 13-year-old, and a 14-year-old, 15-year-old, and then 16-year-old, which is probably when I got my first release, from my parents, and was able to explore up into the Parkchester area, and was able to be guided, if you will, by and she couldn't have been no more than 22, 23, 24 years old. And she is, allowing me with her brother to be, somewhat free. And it was a great experience. And tonight is not what I'm getting into that experience, because, I still did my thing, and I still did things that gave me a reputation that I think was a little unfair. But we'll go with the fact that the reputation stood, and probably, even with some of the relationships I've had at 20, then 25, and then 29, and 35 and 34, because it seems like you go through these 5-year cycles. But I'm here to say to all of America, single parents, you got to let go a little bit and let your child experience some level of freedom with somebody that you can trust. And I remember, she probably would not remember this, but I remember when my mother was going through the back and forth with me, and maybe she does because, maybe my mother had the conversation with her to say, my son's spending a lot of time up there. Are you okay with this? And is he infringing and blah, blah, blah? And all I know is that they had a detailed conversation about it. But what I do know is that she allowed me to have that first taste of freedom when I reflect back. That had to be a powerful thing for a lady in their 20s. And then when I go back to even my sister Karen, and we call each other God brother and God sister, how strong and powerful that was for her to be just a few years older than me, to give me strong, pure guidance. And both of these ladies, and then all the other names that I mentioned behind it, was very instrumental in me being the gentleman. Yeah, I have to give them that. So the tribute is to me becoming a gentleman. And that's very important to me. And so I say to mothers and fathers, whether you're together or you're not together, because my mother and father at the time were together. But my mother is the one. My father worked at night, late shift, and so he probably didn't even realize what was going on. Maybe not. But my mother is the one that dealt with the issue of me sprouting my wings. And at the end of the day, my mother was somewhat, I don't want to say a New York paranoid, but she was a New York watch everything, be careful and suspicious of everyone. And I know there's still people in New York that are just like that, maybe fewer than then. But I had that we won. And we won, and I think in a better case than being so restricted, because you worry about the outside world influencing what you set as a foundation. So if you are a single parent, and even if you're not, rely on, and I'm saying this to say, here's one of the conclusions. The conclusion is, if you've set such a good foundation, then rely on that foundation, that it's okay for your son to, or daughter as well, to be let go. I believe that even in some cases, my daughter, I let go too soon because I removed myself out of the equation. And I was told early in my parenting by a Muslim brother, actually, that said to me that if you don't rock your daughter on your knee, there will be a man that will come along and will rock her on his knee. And I guess the way he expressed that at the time was more so that, and I don't know if it was older, younger, or even the same age, that if you let go too soon, and you always have to judge your child by what she can or he can or cannot handle, And I think in talking with, right now we're speaking in terms of Rosalie, not Karen. Karen always made sure that she stayed in my life, a strict disciplinarian. Rosalie, on the other hand, stayed a disciplinarian, but allowed some freedoms. Both equally distribute, in my opinion, to the foundation of who I ultimately became. And even all the other ladies, and even the older ladies, as we used to call on the bench. Excuse me. The bench, boy, I can't wait to tell stories about the bench and how that used to always pan out. But so my tribute to Rosalie, Karen, Rosalie, and then the ladies that I mentioned, I am so thankful that I had the opportunity. And as I say, girls rock. And I don't think it might, even the title here, it might not even be that fair, because they weren't girls. And to me, they weren't girls. I'm just talking about in the ages that I know now that they were girls. And Rosalie was a young lady, especially when I became fully aware of how old she was when she dealt with me. So imagine 22, 23, 24 years old dealing with a 13 or a 15, 16-year-old, this not that much younger than you, and you dealing with this other cat that's hanging out with your brother, and your brother's doing everything he can in order to get his freedom, and here's a tag along. And you have responsibility because you've dealt with his mother, and his mother is a strict disciplinarian, as well as her brothers. But she know that her mother and his mother are okay with it because she knows that he's safe with her, and my mother has to figure out if her son is okay with her. But it all worked out, and it made me a solid foundation. When I talk to you about my base and my foundation and how strong I became, even though I was a sickle cell patient, and it's probably sometimes I think about when they told me that I only had the trait and that my life expectancy and this and that will be normal and all other kind of stuff, gave me the ability to think like I had no situation other than the fact that I was having these crises, these pain episodes. I mean, that was just outrageous. There were times when people would just be like, yo, where were you? And I was like, yo, I was home, and boom, boom, boom. And it would be 4 or 5 days, sometimes even a week and a half, that I was just in the house from sickle cell. But I move away from what I'm talking about, and I'm giving tribute to the ladies in my life. And sometimes they were, my sister Karen, she cannot be more than 4 years older than me, maybe 4 years. I mean, she looks like she can't even be a year or two older than me, if that's even the case. And actually she looks like she's younger than me, but that's not the case. So anyway, so I wanted to give tribute to girls rock and where that all comes from. And today is the end of February, so that means the end of Black History Month. And quite frankly, I believe it's ludicrous for us to even think, to think that there's only 1 month for us to think about our history, when we know that we had 400 years before we even came into an existence in this country, which is ridiculous. We built the White House and all other kind of stuff, and the fact that Obama's in the White House now might mean something or might not mean something to a whole lot of people, but I know that it means absolutely nothing to Rush Limbaugh's of the world and the Sean Hannity's of the world. And I want that to be said clearly, because I know where Sean Hannity comes from. He's a conspiracy theorist, so he's just really trying to be, all he's really doing is being Howard Stern, in the form of saying that it's all because I am a free speech personality, which is bullshit. Boom. And Rush Limbaugh, I don't quite know his beginnings and his history, other than they all started from zero, and they came up based on the same thing that they trying to accuse President Obama, my hero, and Michelle Obama of being right now. And quite frankly, all I see them are being very jealous people, in the fact that there is a person of color in the White House, and they are doing it in an eloquent way. So when you talk about They, talking about how they are lavishly living and so on and so on. That's so ridiculous, because every president and the first lady of that president lived like kings and queens. That's just the way that America has done it. So now they're trying to say that he's doing it, and he's doing it in such a manner of, we shouldn't be doing that because of where the economy is, where the previous president, and they always say, well, he's trying to act like, it's all because of the previous president. But we all know that the previous president drove this country into the ground, and the only way to save it, as anybody that has been in business will tell you, that it takes money to start a business and it takes money to save a business. And the U.S. is a business. And if you look at every state, and even the U.S., it is under the guise of a business. It's a business. And Vice President Cheney, right? President Cheney and then Vice President Bush, when you think about it, drove this country in the ground for what I say to you now, for monetary reasons. Cheney, oh my goodness, stuck this country up while you were looking at the wars that they were telling you about, mushroom clouds and all that nonsense. Mushroom clouds, remember? So they told you about President Obama with fear mongering and all that nonsense. And I shouldn't be doing this under the girls' rocks, but I'm going to go ahead and finish out like this. So the fear mongering that you try and get Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh to tell you about, well, remember about mushroom clouds? They got us into what? One war? No! 2 wars. 2 wars, unpaid for. President Clinton, yes, President Clinton, that's when I switched over, because I realized that these excuse me, I shouldn't say monkeys, but these I shouldn't say clowns either, gosh. These I can't say that either. These people, which is ridiculous to say, led us into 2 wars, put us into debt in the first place, and put this country and economy into a spiral off of nonsense. Nonsense. So do not let these people snow you. And I was one that was snowed under the guise of Ronald Reagan. And, I was a Reagan, actually Republican, so I can't say that. But anyway, these people try to now say that President Obama is acting in the exact same way that Bush did, and Bush had no leadership skills, but it's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. So this is Haywood Barber coming at you at the end of the show, and I thank you.